This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Subpoena, and not clear what the immediate reason for that is, but we know that just yesterday reports emerged that former Mayor Adams' chief of staff Frank Carone was subpoenaed, as well as a Brooklyn Monsignor, in terms of their potential business dealings. All part of an ongoing series of investigations swirling around members of the NYPD and Mayor Adams' administration. The head of the Secret Service indicates his agency needs an overhaul following the first assassination attempt of Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump. At a press event today, acting Secret Service Director Ronald Rowe said agents did not give clear direction to local cops on July 13th in Butler, Pennsylvania. And Rowe says there was complacency within some agents that day and that they will be held accountable. It won't be easy getting around Manhattan next week amid heightened security and road closures. World leaders will gather in New York for the UN General Assembly next week. NYPD Chief Phil Rivera, the chief of transportation, says the UN General Assembly means more congestion on the road for drivers.
We strongly encourage mass transit, or if possible, please avoid the area altogether. Due to the high level of security associated with this event, intermediate pedestrian freezes and traffic shutdowns will occur.
Drivers are being warned there will be street closures, lane closures, starting Sunday in Midtown East, and they'll last all next week. Law enforcement across several agencies tasked with protecting world leaders. They'll also be keeping a close eye on protests of the pro-Palestine, anti-Israel variety. President Biden scheduled to attend the General Assembly on Tuesday. Israel says it's eliminated a senior commander in the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah. This happened during an airstrike earlier today, and it comes as Israel has ramped up efforts to degrade Iran-backed Lebanese militant group Hezbollah. These efforts reportedly included this week booby traps causing pagers and walkie-talkies to explode, and that injured people affiliated with Hezbollah and killed dozens. Israel has neither confirmed nor denied that operation, but the U.S. does say it believes the IDF was behind it. Back home, ahead of Election Day, ballots in Georgia will now have to be counted by hand. Critics are worried that after Georgia's election board approved a new rule by a 3-2 vote, that could delay the reporting of election results. But critics say the three board members who supported the rule are Trump allies who have vocally supported him in the past. Legal challenges expected with this one. In sports, the Mets are looking to keep it going tonight as they will face the Philadelphia Phillies out at Citi Field following last night's win, which saw homers from Mark Vientos, Pete Alonso, and Brandon Nimmo. This is the second of a 4-game series at Citi Field. If the season ended today, the Mets would be a wild card team. The Yankees clinched a playoff spot earlier this week. They fell to the Mariners yesterday afternoon, but they'll continue their push for the AL East crown, taking on the Oakland A's tonight out on the West Coast. And the NFL's Week 3 got underway last night. The Jets now 2-1 on the young season. They beat up on the rival New England Patriots with a 24-3 win. The Giants travel to play the Cleveland Browns Sunday. From the Ramsey Mazda Weather Center, overnight, partly cloudy skies, a low near 62. Tomorrow, mostly sunny with a high near 76. Sunday, partly sunny, getting up to 74. WABC News Time 5:04. Katz and Cosby next. 78 and cloudy in Midtown. I'm James Flippin.
Welcome to the 5 o'clock show. It's time for Common Sense. Now, it's Katz and Cosby with John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby, standing for truth, justice, and the American way, bringing common sense to the world. Now, here's John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby.
Well, we are back, and we got a full house on a Friday. Governor Patterson, it's good to see you here.
Thank you. It's good to be
Ed Cox.
Always a pleasure.
And Judge Weinberg. Well, myself, Judge Weinberg, and Governor Patterson were all up in Lake George last night.
I know we missed you guys. It was me and Tony Carbonetti.
And the State Business Council annual meeting. And John was honored with a very prestigious Corning Award.
Yeah, but I called all of you up to the stage. I called the judge up on the stage. I called the governor on the stage. And I said, Our 5 o'clock show is great because they're participants.
Bravo. What about me and Ed? You didn't. We didn't get called.
We were going to call you to the stage, but you just weren't there.
We weren't available.
No one had to be working here, right?
We weren't available. By the way, congrats on the big award. Well deserved. Yeah. Well deserved.
Well, it's a beautiful part of the state.
I love that part of the state. And speaking of somebody who needs an award, I think Jill Biden needs an award, Ed Cox, because here it is. Joe Biden does his first.
Certainly needs an award.
Yes.
Absolutely.
This is the first cabinet meeting that happened in 11 months, guys, for Joe Biden leading his cabinet. You could think of all the things going on in the world. And guess what? He mumbles. He was horrible. It was worse than the debate. And then he said, after 5 seconds, let me pass it on to Jill Biden, who then ran the meeting.
I think it's absolutely historical. I think it's wonderful. I think Dr. Jill and President Joe, they're both entitled to share the Edith Wilson Award when you thought you had a president, but you had a first lady running the government.
Rita, I have to remind you, we have Speaker Mike Johnson coming on in the next few minutes. So everybody hold on. The Speaker himself is going to be on. But the last time he was on, he told us a story that he insisted on a one-on-one meeting with President Biden. And the Speaker told him, you signed this. And Joe Biden says, I never signed that.
Scary.
Remember that?
I do remember.
Johnson
I
had to
do
get
remember.
a copy of the document and show it to him.
Yes.
And Mike Johnson got a copy of the document, and he showed him that his people behind his back made him sign that, or made him, or just he didn't know what he was signing.
And John, if you saw him today, I'm not surprised. It was horrible.
And he didn't want to do it. He didn't want.
You made me do it. I didn't want to do it.
Oh, there's the song. There's the song.
I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it. You made me do it.
You can tell it's Friday, guys. I'm dancing Cosby.
I feel more comfortable that Jill was running the cabinet meeting than he running
By
the
the
cabinet
way,
meeting.
I actually do too. And you know what? Speaking of which, John, you brought up that Speaker Johnson who's going to be calling us any second, and that's going to be a biggie. This is a big day to get him because he was also with President Trump right after the shooting. Remember that took place, the attempted assassination that was happening in Florida, the second assassination attempt, and House Speaker Mike Johnson was with him down in Mar-a-Lago right after that. So I can't wait to hear what he thinks, what he thought about that, what the president told him. And also, Ed, this comes today with the Secret Service guy. This guy, I'm just going to say it, he needs to resign. He was horrible.
By the way, some other breaking news. General Miley confirms that days before January 6th, he confirms that President Trump requested sufficient National Guard or soldiers to protect the Capitol.
By the way, that's a big deal because Milley has not always been with Trump.
And they never told, I'll give a little bit of innocence to
Nancy Pelosi,
because to her own daughter, she says they never told her. So the people behind Nancy Pelosi didn't tell her, and they didn't do it.
Although chief of staff should,
yes, but somebody has to be investigating these things.
Exactly. Nobody has,
And let me tell our
John.
listeners, if you don't get a Democrat, a Republican Congress, this stuff is going to die. Nobody's ever going to investigate this. It's just going to go down the sewer.
Absolutely. That's a great point because even right now, the only people who are leading the charge on some of these investigations, there's a few Democrats, but most are Republicans.
If it weren't for our majority in the House, this country would be going down the drain.
And by the way, later on, we're going to have Miranda Devine, who has a new book out called The Big Guy. And this is all revealed. Miranda was ahead of the curve years ago, and nobody would have known the truth of it because they blockaded Miranda Devine's reporting, but for the fact that the Republicans control the House of Representatives.
And by the way, Annie Oakley would not necessarily be pushing for this. I'm talking about Kamala Harris because to talk about flip-flopping, it wasn't that long ago, Ed, that she said that she's for mandatory gun buybacks. And then she's on Oprah last night and said, God, if somebody breaks into my house, I'm opening fire,
She's
essentially.
got a gun under her bed, no doubt.
Yeah, she's Annie Oakley now. You can't make it up. The
Annie,
flip-flopping.
get your gun.
Yeah, Annie, get your gun. John, I understand the speaker's calling in. We got some breaking news with that.
Breaking news, WABC.
And joining us now here with some latest breaking news is the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Mr. Speaker, great to have you here. You know, big news today. You guys just passed in the House to give much more security to future presidential candidates and current ones. Explain.
We did, and you can thank our New York delegation for that. Mike Lawler led this bill. He had the foresight to present it in the Congress, and we got it through the House. We're sending it to the Senate. What this bill does is it will require the same level of protection for Donald J. Trump as is provided by a sitting president. And I think every American who looks at this and thinks about it objectively will understand there is a dire necessity to do that. I mean, he's had the second assassination attempt now. Ironically, my friends, as fate would have it, I was with him last Sunday at Mar-a-Lago right after the event took place, and I spent almost 3 hours with him, my wife and I, after that happened. He was not shaken, I'll tell you. Y'all know Donald Trump as well as I do. I mean, he is unshakable. And the thing is that there's no person and no leader in the history of America that's been so attacked as he has, so aggressively, and yet remains so strong and resilient. But he still needs protection, and it's inexcusable that it has not been provided as needed.
Mr. Speaker, I know President Trump for almost more than 45 years. The fact is, I think he is a target. Iran stands to lose probably hundreds of billions of dollars if President Trump becomes president again. The people who went on the wrong road in America on the rule of law, they can't afford to have him become president. I mean, he is definitely a target, and I said that to him.
Yes, he is a target, and it's because of those reasons. It's because our adversaries around the world fear him, and that's what you want in a president, by the way. We believe in, Ronald Reagan's old admonition of peace through strength. We need our allies to respect us and our enemies to fear us. They do not fear Joe Biden. They do not fear Kamala Harris, but they do fear Donald Trump because he's a strong leader, and that's what the country needs. So that's one of the reasons that he's in some danger, and also the fact that the Democrats have been completely unhinged in their rhetoric, and we've been watching this play out since he rode down that famous golden escalator in 2016. They began to attack him mercilessly, and they use this over-the-top language where they say all the time, they compare him to Hitler, they see he's a threat to democracy, quote-unquote, and it's just really, really dangerous stuff because it triggers people, in a literal sense. And we have called upon all the Democrats to turn their rhetoric down. Let's have a vigorous debate about policy. That's great. Let's talk about the records. Let's talk about the plans. Let's not talk about the person because this is a really volatile environment we're in, and it's as we've demonstrated now, we've got to be more responsible than that.
Mr. Speaker, I have a lot of Democratic friends, and I say to them that President Trump, maybe you don't like him, but he has terrorized the terrorists. They are scared of him instead of us being scared of them. And number two is that the fact is that he's the only one that has the courage to keep us safe.
But that's exactly right. And as he rightfully said during our convention a few weeks back, none of this happened under his watch. When he was in the White House, we didn't have Israel being invaded by Iran and its proxies, the terrorists. We didn't have Russia invading Ukraine. We didn't have China acting so provocatively and making threats to Taiwan and everybody around the world. None of this happened on his watch, and that is because he was a steady and strong hand. He's not predictable. Vladimir Putin said the quiet part out loud a couple of months back on a stage in Moscow, and they asked him, when Biden was still in the race, who do you favor between Biden and Trump? He said Biden because he's predictable. You got to have strength right now. This is the most dangerous time that our nation has faced since World War II. And we are on the verge, as President Trump reminds rally attendees all the time, we're on the verge of World War III. And if we make a mistake in this election cycle, and heaven forbid, Kamala Harris were to become the commander-in-chief of the U.S. military, it is the prospect of that is just frightening to think of. We got to reelect Donald J. Trump.
And Mr. Speaker, everybody, we're talking to the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. I know that you have been very active, involved, first of all, of protecting our borders, trying to close it up, which has been great. And it's important to do, obviously. The other issue is election integrity. And I know the SAVE Act, which makes only U.S. citizens able to vote. You would think that that's a no-brainer. What's being done to make sure people have faith in our elections? I know it's something very important to you.
Well, it is. And, you guys have become great friends, and you've seen me in New York so many times over this election cycle because New York is the key to the majority, New York and California. So all of our incumbents there and our challengers for these races to flip blue seats to red are so important. Congressmen like D'Esposito and LaLota and Lawler and Molinaro and Brandon Williams. And then we've got Allison Esposito, who can flip New York 18 against Pat Ryan. And, of course, you've got Malliotakis and Elise Stefanik and Claudia Tenney. I mean, it's just a great group. But I've been traveling the country nonstop. So I've done campaign events in over 206 cities now across 39 states in the last 9 months, right? Something's happening out there. There's an energy in the base, and we believe we can win this. But as President Trump and I were talking as recently as last night, we're desperately and deeply concerned about election integrity. We've got to ensure that the election is fair. And that is a top concern of the American people around the country. The reason we passed the SAVE Act and the reason we have worked as recently as this week to get it signed into law and force it on the Senate is because the SAVE Act simply says that when the states are registering someone to vote for the first time, they have to provide proof of citizenship. It is against federal law for any non-U.S. citizen to vote in a U.S. election. But the law is not being adhered to because the states are not requesting identification. So the SAVE Act would force that to be done, require it to be done. And yet we cannot get Chuck Schumer to pass it in the Senate. It is an outrage. It's something every American, almost all Americans agree with. It's almost a 90% issue in public opinion polling, but they still won't do it. And so we got to keep fighting for election security at the national, state, and local level and make sure, as President Trump always says, it's too big to rig. We got to do that.
Well, we've won part of the war on AM radio. Yesterday, the subcommittee voted 45-2 on going ahead with AM radio, and thank you for all your help on that.
Well, we got to help. We got to keep Cats Roundtable on the air, and all these other really valuable resources that are provided, the voices and the on AM radio, the warnings about weather events and national emergencies. I mean, all that would go away if the radical left had their say. And the reason, of course, they're arrayed against AM radio is because they're afraid of the truth being out on the airwaves. They're afraid of voices of common sense and conservatism being out there. And so it's never been more important to do that, and we've got to protect it. The freedom of that at the congressional level. It literally comes down to an act of Congress now, so we're working on it.
Agree. And the other thing I've said to people is if AM radio goes away, because the reason we have Space Force is to protect our GPS satellites and our communication satellites. If our enemies shoot them down, then the American people have nothing. They don't have cell phones. They don't have anything.
Exactly, and don't think that Russia and China and our other adversaries don't know that as well. I mean, they have this in their playbook, and so we've got to have adequate protection against that. And AM radio is part of Americana. I mean, it's part of who we are as a people, and it'd be unimaginable not to have that great resource.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your support. Don't forget Cats and Cosby, too, not just Cats Roundtable. Two awesome shows that you love,
right.
okay?
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for all your support. Thank you,
Mr. Speaker.
You got to read it. Thanks so much, John. We'll talk to you soon.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Wow, what a great conversation.
Because of our ad today, too, it's a lot of other congressmen are folding in when they realize it's bipartisan, it's good for America. The subcommittee voted 45-2. I'm seeing one of the people who voted no, the congressman from Utah that's running for Senate in
Curtis.
in
I
Utah.
think last name Curtis, I think, right?
John Curtis.
Yes.
No relationship to
our Curtis.
To our Curtis.
Yes, exactly.
And I'm going to see him for dinner tonight.
Good. Hopefully by dessert, he's changed his mind. By the way, also some good news. Andrew Garbarino is also now on board.
Andrew Garbarino, Peter King spoke to him, and Garbarino is signing up, and he'll be part of the 262, maybe 263 bipartisan Congress people to vote for.
Great, because it is important, and I'm glad you hit on the reasons why. With all the threats that are going on right now to America and our grid, our electric, I mean, there's so many layers.
Well, listen,
it's key.
The reason we have Space Force is because our satellites are under attack. If they knocked out, if our enemies, whether whoever, Russia, China, whoever, knocked out our GPS system and knocked out our communication system, you know what your iPhone is worth?
Zero.
Zero.
Yes, sadly.
99 cents maybe. And you will not be able to find out what's going on except for the superstations, of which WABC is a superstation. And FEMA is working very hard on just about making it nuclear proof.
Which is why all the FEMA directors, current and former, have been supportive.
Having AM radio.
Exactly, because they understand in a clench, you turn on to AM radio. That is why it's key.
Who do we have on now?
Now we have the editor of the National Review, Rich Lowry. Rich, before we get to what happened to you, I want to first get your thoughts on President Trump and what's been happening with this incredible rhetoric against him. Here it is. He has 2 assassination attempts, and already the rhetoric is ratcheting up against him. I mean, and then we had threats yesterday, as it turned out, to the Supreme Court justices, and nobody seems to show restraint, especially on the Democratic side, Rich.
Yeah, after the first one, it's amazing we have to enumerate the assassination attempts now, but after the first one, at least there was maybe 2 days where they said, okay, let's think about the tone we're using against this guy. Joe Biden gave a speech from the Oval Office saying this. This time around, zero of that, and worse and more perversely, they're blaming him. They say it's his rhetoric that's catalyzing people to come and try to shoot him. So it's completely perverse.
Yeah, it is. And in fact, all the members of the squad, there was an interview yesterday. They were talking to them on Capitol Hill. They doubled and tripled down. They're like, yeah, he's a threat to democracy. He's the worst. I mean, to me, it's downright dangerous, Rich.
Yeah, clearly the feverish atmosphere has played into these attempts. I like a free and robust debate. It's hard to point to any one thing that anyone says and says, oh, this is why this nut job went and tried to do this. But let's have equal rules, right? So at the very same time, they were saying that Trump and Vance had catalyzed these threats to Springfield, Ohio, all of which were hoaxes and many of which just came from overseas, probably from Russia. They weren't accepting that argument when it came to Trump. So either political rhetoric leads to violence or it doesn't, but be consistent about your arguments, and they're not.
Absolutely. Ed Cox.
And Rich, really, the worst is Mrs. Clinton, a First Lady, led the charge on it.
Yeah, I mean, she's one of the worst people in American public life. And the thing the other day where she wants people to be punished for saying things that are supposedly Russian propaganda, right? And if someone, wants to cut off funding to Ukraine because they don't think it's a good use of our money, I disagree with that. But if they say that, is that Russian propaganda? Should that person be shut down? Should that person be investigated? It's profoundly un-American.
Yeah, and speaking of un-American, Judge Weinberg, you want to talk with Rich? Because, boy, what you've been going through.
Rich, I read your column in National Review, and I want to say on behalf of the American people, I want to say I am deeply offended by the fact that you were canceled based on a false allegation. What was troubling to me is not only you were canceled from the left, but you were also canceled by the right. Would you explain to us what happened?
Yeah. So first of all, I appreciate you having me on to talk about this. Rita was just saying in a clinch, you go to AM radio in a national crisis. When I got a very, very small crisis here, I really appreciate being able to go to my favorite AM radio station, you guys. So thanks for having me on. But I was on with Megyn Kelly after the second assassination attempt on Sunday evening, and we got on to Springfield, and I briefly garbled the word migrants. And it didn't sound great what I came up with because I caught myself halfway through and then corrected myself. But what I said wasn't a racial slur. It began with M as in Mary, right? There's no racial slur that begins with M. But the Media Matters and these people said I'd said a racial slur. The headlines were all kind of innuendo, McCarthyite innuendo. It appeared I said it. Well, either I said it or I didn't. And I didn't. I mean, people have done like Zapruder tape kind of analysis of this, looking at my lips and how they're pursed the way you say an M. Clearly I was saying an M. And I don't have racist Tourette syndrome where I just walk around blurting this word out randomly.
And then what happened to you, Rich?
Well, some people on the center left defended me, which was great. I thought it was a tempest in a teapot over in a day or two, but then the Badger Institute, a conservative think tank in Wisconsin, canceled me without explanation. And Indiana State University got in touch with my Speakers Bureau and canceled me, saying it was too much of a security threat to have me on campus. Too many security resources would have to be used to protect me, which is obviously a transparent pretext or a deep indictment of them if the students there are so intolerant, that they're going to threaten to blow up.
Well, that means you can always make that assertion, Rich, and close down everybody, so you have no free speech.
They've used this for years against all sorts of people. But I've been really heartened. I wrote the piece that you were kind enough to mention. I've had a lot of support. I have speaking invitations flowing in. So most people, they're fair-minded. They hate this stuff. They know how poisonous and insidious it is. And just last thing, I have gallons of ink to use to defend myself. I have a platform. I can come on with you guys and defend myself. But if you're a non-journalist, you say something on a work Zoom call that's misinterpreted, they will destroy your livelihood. They will destroy you, and you don't have the means to defend yourself that I'm lucky to have, and people like you have megaphones and megafans are lucky to have, and it's scary. It's why people are scared, which is profoundly wrong.
Absolutely. And by the way, I've known Rich for decades. You don't have a racist bone in your body, for the record. So we're honored to have you here. Let's go to Governor Patterson. You got a question for Rich Lowry?
Well, Rich, I have talked to you on and off the air going back 12 or 13 years. I couldn't even imagine you saying something like that.
Oh, thank you.
And the more that it gets discussed, actually, the worse it is, because it's really a fallacious allegation.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And my strategy is sort of based on your insight there. Just don't discuss it, let it go away. But it wasn't going away, so I just came out completely swinging, completely defiant, and people appreciate that.
Well, you had no choice in that regard. You had to do that.
Absolutely. Well, by the way, for the record, you have a megaphone and a mega fan here. Mega fans, plural.
Plural. Likewise. Back at you guys. I really appreciate it.
We love you, Rich.
Thank you. Rich.
Thank you for being here, Rich. Thanks so much.
All right, let's take a break, and who are we coming back with?
We have Larry Kudlow.
Oh, my God, Larry. We'll find out what the heck is going on. We got a $42,000 market. Let's take that break.
Larry Kudlow here with an urgent warning. Washington is coming for your savings to pay for their spending mistakes. That's why thousands of Americans are shielding their savings with gold. For a free 2024 gold guide that explains everything you need to know, please go to colonialmetalsgroup.com/Kudlow or just call 800-621-3908. That's 800-621-3908 for your free gold guide and learn if you qualify for up to $7,500 in free silver now.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Get 15% off a set of Brake Best Select, Select Pro, or Import Direct brake pads and 2 rotors now at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
I'm sending my Aunt Tina money directly to her bank account in the Philippines with Western Union.
I-64
She's the self-proclaimed bingo queen of Manila, and I know better to interrupt her on bingo night, even to pick up cash.
N31.
Sending money direct to her bank account is super fast, and Aunt Tina gets more time to
Bingo!
Be the bingo queen. Western Union. Send money in-store directly to their bank accounts in the Philippines. Services offered by Western Union Financial Services, Inc., NMLS number 906983, or Western Union International Services, LLC, NMLS number 906985. Licensed as money transmitters by the New York State Department of Financial Services. See terms for details.
A common sense recap of the day's biggest stories. It's John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby. Cats and Cosby on 77 WABC.
Well, we are back. And now we have Larry Kudlow, the country's leading, the number one economist in the country. Well, Larry, 42,000 market, half a point drop in the rate. What say you? What's going on?
Yeah, well, the Fed spiked the punch bowl, didn't they? They just spiked it.
It's an election year.
Yeah, and they
and you thought they were honest.
They gave Kamala sort of a 50 basis point gift, an election gift. I mean, they could have done 25. I think there's an economic case for it. Not overly strong, but okay. 50 looked very political to me. I think that they could have waited. The next meeting is the day after the election. I think they could have waited, but they decided not to. As I say, I think they could have done 25, but they gave her a 50 basis point little election gift. Stocks love it. Listen, stock markets, they love when you pour in the money supply and add liquidity, at least in the short term. One thing I want to say is my friend Mickey Bowman, who was a Trump appointee to the Federal Reserve Board, she issued a dissent. It was the first dissent, I think, in about 15 years. And she basically issued this warning. She said it's premature to declare victory over inflation. And I happen to agree with that, particularly if you're a middle-income family or a lower-income working family. They're still facing very high prices of 20% or 30% increases in the past few years. But whatever I think, that's what the Fed did, and the stock market liked it, and the Kudlow Trust liked it, even though Kudlow himself is not crazy about it.
I understand, but you got to look at it. The rate of inflation depends on one thing. Who is elected on November 5th? If Donald Trump is elected and he reduces the price of oil to $50.55, you know what happens? Then the price of food goes down, inflation goes down, interest rates go down, and inflation goes away.
Yeah. Listen, I'm with you on that. In fact, hundreds of prices throughout the economy are affected by the price of oil and natural gas, but more oil. Hundreds are affected by petroleum. So if Trump if Trump does win and we get drill baby drill and permitting reform and we go to 16 or 17 million barrels a day, which is where we should have been, oil prices will go down to $40. As you said, it'll cut them in half. And that will conquer inflation. But the problem is that hasn't happened yet. And the reality is...
40, how many more days? 48 days? 47?
Yeah, less.
Yeah, I think it's 46 days are left. And I would just, we had Kevin Warsh on the show. He's a terribly smart guy, former Federal Reserve governor and Wall Streeter, whom we all know. And I asked him if Kamala wins and she spends another $2 trillion, as her economic speech suggested, and she raises taxes by $4 or $5 trillion, then you'll have too much money chasing too few goods, and the inflation genie will spring up once again. And there's another reason why the Fed could have waited, to be honest with you, because the political outcome affects policy, and policy affects what the Federal Reserve does, fiscal policy, that is. So I thought it was all very curious, but for the moment it all seems wonderful if you own these stock indexes, as I do. But I always own them. I don't try to time them. I always own them.
Larry, I want to ask you about this. This is making a lot of headlines from the Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg. He's saying we're on pace. They did 8 EV charging stations, and it cost $7.5 billion. Are you kidding me?
There's a lot, Larry, one thing you left out, there's a lot in this Biden Harris budget that can be cut out. For instance, the part of the Green New Deal that they've passed. Just get rid of that. I mean, you begin to cut the deficit right away, and that's going to have an impact on inflation, bringing it down.
But then Pete Buttigieg would cry because obviously he's on pace with 8 charging stations for $7.5 billion.
There's a lot of waste in it.
No, but wait, Rita, he said we're on pace for 8. You got to understand, this bill was passed 2 years ago for the $7.5 billion. Right now, there are 0 additional charging stations. 0. He's saying we're on pace.
Isn't that frightening? Isn't that frightening? I mean, the American public, to Ed's point, should be scratching their heads going, what are we spending our money on?
Right. It just, right. It shows you the ineptitude of government. And, back in the day, if you want to go back, and some of us are very old on this, when automobiles and gasoline, in the 1900s, the 1920s and so forth, the oil companies, Standard Oil and all the various subs of the Standard Oil Company, they built their own gas stations. They built their own. The government didn't build them. They built them, okay? Standard Oil built them. Mobil built them, or it was all Standard Oil. So that just goes to show you. And the landscape was dotted with gas stations. So now we allocated $7 billion. But to Ed Cox's point, that misnamed Inflation Reduction Act, right? That thing is really running over $1 trillion. It was originally estimated at a couple of $100 billion, which was bad enough, because the credits and the subsidies have no time limits. Okay, so that thing, you could knock that out. You could save yourself $1 trillion. The country does not want a Green New Deal jammed down their throats. They do not want electric vehicles jammed down their throats. If you want an electric vehicle, I'm fine with it, but go on ahead and buy it. I just don't want taxpayers to subsidize it. If you want to build charging stations, I'm all for that. But why don't these companies build their own charge? By the way, I would bet you Tesla could build more charging stations faster than the federal government could.
And then you grow your way out of it, don't you? Out of the deficit, out of inflation. Yes. Isn't that the bottom line? And you don't do that by raising taxes. You cut them to do that.
What you want is that the ratio of federal debt to GDP, to the economy, you want to bring that ratio down. Okay? It's moving towards about 120%, okay, which is a peacetime record. Actually, it's heading for a wartime record, too, even though there's no direct wars. You want to just grow the GDP faster, and you want to slow down spending, and then the ratio will fall, and that's okay. Then we'll be fine. We can get that ratio down, below 100, 90%, 80%. You don't have to retire the debt. Just grow the economy and curb spending. You got the Musk Commission that Trump talks about all the time, like the Peter Grace Commission when Ed and I were working for Reagan. That's a very good idea. It's a very good idea, and I think Trump will follow through if he wins.
Larry, we'll be listening to you tomorrow between 10 o'clock and 1 o'clock Saturday, our number one show on Saturday with numbers going up to the stratosphere.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Rita. Thanks, everybody.
Have a great weekend, Larry.
And Rita, you got some hot news for us.
It's the top news of the day, sponsored by Goya. Here's Rita Cosby.
I sure do, and it's hot at the Secret Service. Well, the head of the Secret Service says the agency needs an overhaul following the first assassination attempt of Donald Trump, you think? Well, Director Ronald Rowe said agents did not give clear direction to local police on July 13th in Butler, Pennsylvania. Rose said there was complacency with some agents on that day and that they will at some point be held accountable. He also said that President Trump now has the same protection as President Biden, but he claimed that that was in place before the second assassination attempt. We're going to get into more of this later. And also coming up, we're going to be talking with Victoria Coates about this. Israel says it has killed a senior Hezbollah commander in Lebanon. It happened during an airstrike on Friday, and it comes as Israel ramps up efforts to degrade the Iran-backed terrorist group. And those are the big headlines of the day.
There are black beans, and then there are Goya black beans. Whole, plump, delicious, and loved by all kinds of chefs. The professional chefs at Chef's Best love them so much, they awarded our beans their Excellence Award. At Home Chefs love them so much, they awarded our beans the internationally acclaimed Goya black beans, whole, plump, and oh so delicious. Find them in the Goya section of your local grocery store. If it's Goya, it has to be good.
At Arizona State University, we offer a variety of programs online designed and taught by a renowned faculty to empower your success. That's why 87% of ASU online graduates stated they were promoted or received an increase in salary after earning their degree. Visit asuonline.asu.edu.
You're commuting home with Katz and Cosby. Now here's John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby on 77 WABC.
And we are back here on Katz and Cosby. Let's go to Deputy National Security Advisor, the former one in the Trump administration, Victoria Coates. Victoria, we have so much we want to ask you about. Let's first get to this big news that John was sharing at the top, where Milley, according now to transcripts that are coming out, again, thank goodness for the Republican House, but they're releasing some transcripts which show that Milley was aware that President Trump said we need to keep everybody safe prior to January 6th, talking about bringing the National Guard and others. Where's Milley been all this time, and what does this mean?
Oh, Rita, good to be with you. No, this is just a shocking, I wish it were a shocking development. Having worked with General Milley, I'm not surprised to learn he was saying one thing behind the scenes and another in front of the cameras. But obviously, President Trump had no intention for January 6th to have gone the way that it did. This was not something he was inciting or encouraging. And this gives the lie to all of that very dangerous rhetoric that President Biden and Vice President Harris and all of their cohorts have been engaging on, saying this is the worst thing that has ever happened since the Civil War. And, that Trump is responsible for it. It's a disgrace. It's an embarrassment. And I think all Americans need a better accounting of what actually happened on January 6th, not what the J6 committee, headed by Hitchinger and Liz Cheney and all those folks, not what they said, but what actually happened.
And in fact, I just want to read everybody the quote. This is, again, from Milley. And what they're saying in the transcripts is essentially it says, I want to make sure that given all the large amount of protesters here on January 6th, that you make sure, quoting the president saying you have sufficient National Guard or soldiers to make sure it's a safe event. I don't care if you use Guard or soldiers, active duty, do whatever you have to do. Just make sure it's safe. Make sure it's covered. That's pretty strong.
Oh, absolutely. And it shows that he was cognizant of that. He did not want anyone in the Congress to be in peril. He was not trying to disrupt what the House and the Senate needed to do that day. It's just, and it is so outrageous that we have people still sitting in jail for this who are getting these extended sentences. It's just terrible. I think it's a national embarrassment. And somebody, it's not going to be Oprah, Rita, but somebody needs to ask Vice President Harris about this.
Yeah, that's a great point. Judge Weinberg.
I want to switch gears with you, Victoria. I want to talk to you about the Hezbollah leader who was killed by the Israelis. And this is a guy responsible for the bombing of Marine barracks in 1983 in Beirut, killing 200 of our people. And there was a $7 million bounty on his head posted by the U.S. government. U.S. government never got to him. The Israelis did. What are your thoughts?
No, this is huge, Judge. And what the IDF put out a little bit ago is that he was, after Shukar was, who was his predecessor, also under a bounty for the 1983 Marine barracks bombing, that Ibrahim Akil was the leader of the elite Hezbollah Radan unit, and that they were planning an October 7th style attack on northern Israel called Conquer Galilee. Remember, the biblical sites are up there. So they were going to go in and infiltrate the Christian, Druze, and Jewish communities up there and do that murder, rape, kidnapping, torturing, looting type sensational attack on or around the anniversary of October 7th. Lovely way for them to celebrate. And that the IDF had unmask this plot. I assume that's why they started with the pager and other detonation attacks earlier this week, and then they went in and took this guy out. And he was literally at a plotting meeting. They took out 20 of the leadership of Hezbollah, and so hopefully this is a devastating event. And the White House responded by saying they were looking for a diplomatic solution. It's mind-boggling.
What did you make of also that Blinken and others were like, oh, we had nothing to do with it. We didn't know anything about it. Like kids, not even saying good for Israel.
Say nothing is always an option. Instead of making the United States look weak, Hezbollah, as Judge just pointed out, did not differentiate between Israelis and Americans in 1983. They don't differentiate between us now. They're happy to kill both at whatever their easiest opportunity. So if you can't say, thank you, IDF, here's your check for $7 million, and I think the IDF should actually get the $5 million that was under Rewards for Justice for Shuker, and they should get this $7 million for Akil. But if you can't do that, just don't say anything. It's pitiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And Cox.
I'm for Miranda Devine for Secretary of State.
And what about Victoria Coates for what president? Then?
Exactly.
Exactly. Victoria, I want to ask you also about speaking of president. I couldn't believe this. This is Ron Rowe. He's the acting director of the U.S. Secret Service. He comes out today and he said, well, we had some communication problems. But since the Butler rally, the president, former President Trump, has had the same amount as Joe Biden. Everything's good. And boy, did we do a great job in Florida. And I'm sitting there thinking, excuse me, in Florida, there was a guy hanging out for 12 hours by a fence line. And, you clearly missed him. You didn't check the perimeter. And if that's top security, boy, is the president in trouble.
No, 100%. And yes, you're right. This guy was there for 12 hours. There were no dogs. There were no drones. None of the obvious tools that you would have to secure a site like that for the true VIP. And that's that it's just a lie, and that he has come that close twice. This reminds me, Rita, of the 1970s and what went down with President Ford. And there were these two incidents, and it was showing the wheels coming off of the apparatus of our country. And so I think, I need the Secret Service to stop trying to cover its collective posteriors and realize that they have a severe problem, that Florida was in no way a great day for them. The fact that guy got that close, and that the rhetoric, as we were just talking about, around January 6th, around President Trump, is creating this sense that it is permissible to use violence against him. This is so deeply dangerous for our country. And, we've got to get through these next 6 weeks, and we've got to get to Election Day. And it's right now, it feels very, very unsettled.
Yeah, it sure does. And it's downright dangerous on so many levels. Victoria Coates, thank you so much for joining us on such important topics today. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And now let's go to a break. And we are coming back with Miranda Devine. And we got some big breaking news. Don't hang up. Some big breaking news.
It's a common sense recap of the big stories. It's Katz and Cosby on 77 WABC. Breaking news, WABC.
Well, there is some breaking news. The Democratic Party looks like they've been cheating on that program. What's the name of that program, Judge?
Act Blue.
Act Blue.
That's one of their campaign gimmicks.
How did they say it in that movie Casablanca? I'm shocked. That's right. The Democratic Party is cheating?
Dark money. Miranda Devine has broken this story.
State attorneys general looking into it.
Okay, the House Republicans asked 5 state attorneys general to investigate this because the violation, these are crimes, and Miranda Devine has broken that story.
A great investigative journalist, and she joins us now, of course, with the New York Post. Miranda, take it away, these big explosive details.
I guess they're not that explosive.
I guess maybe they exploded. Maybe the Democrats were listening to us on that one. What do you think, Gov?
Where's the control
Do you
room?
notice whenever it has to do with like some big explosive details that has to do with the Democrats, what are you guys doing here, Gov?
It's, basically canceling out the transmission so that the public can't hear it.
Hey, we just got through. Miranda, you broke through on the laptop.
Hi, Rita. Hi, John. Hi, everybody. I'm so sorry. I think that you're probably right. There was some sort of evil interference because obviously the Democrats do not like this story at all. This is, their main online fundraising platform, Act Blue, and there's been suspicions about it for a long time. Kamala Harris has had tens of millions of dollars from it poured into her coffers. And now we have this committee in the House run by Republicans, and they've done an investigation with some really crack money laundering experts, and they've discovered several anomalies, hundreds and maybe thousands of anomalies. They've looked at 14 years worth of donations, and they've found that there are countless people who they could not afford. They're on like $40,000 a year incomes, and they're donating $60,000 a year to Act Blue, and it all gets laundered through, elderly people that have never donated. They're on the books. Republicans who would never vote for Act Blue, who are surprised when they're contacted and told that they've been donating every week. It's really shady, and one of the things that they discovered was that the use of these sort of gift cards and debit cards that have no, that 3-digit credit card number, these numbers are not needed, and so they're managing to, they'll get a big donation from some dark money group, and then they split it up into small donations and launder them through gift cards. So these are all the allegations, and they're being sent to these 5 Republican attorneys general.
Miranda, is it foreign money too?
Yes, that's certainly the suspicion. And in fact, I can't tell you the exact details, but I'm working on a story at the moment of several $100 million from Ukraine that went to the Democrats that was laundered in that way through these cards that don't have a 3-digit number. Yep, that was
not only is Zelensky. Oh my God! I don't want to say anything more. They're going to come and take me. They're going to come and take me away.
By the way, that's a big amount of money. You just said several $100 million, correct? That's enormous.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Okay, Miranda.
At least $500 million.
Miranda, this may be, to our knowledge, the single biggest campaign fraud, finance fraud in America's history. This is absolutely outstanding work by you.
Well, no, look, I can't claim a huge amount of credit. I really, this is the work of the administrative, I've got their name wrong, the Services Committee that have done this work. And it's still a work in progress. I mean, they've done a sort of a data investigation, and this is what money laundering experts say is glaringly obvious, but it still needs to be taken to the next level, and that's why it's been referred to these state attorneys general who have these straw donors in their states so they can launch a criminal investigation.
Is that because they don't trust the federal government to do it?
No, I think it's, yes.
Would you trust the Department of Justice to do it right now?
Yeah, well, I mean, 100%. As if Merrick Garland's Department of Justice is ever going to launch an inquiry, A, and B, because these straw donors, they're victims basically. Their identities have been used without their knowledge to become these fake donors, and they live in the states, and so that's a state crime, and that's why. And these Republican attorneys general are going to be much more reliable in prosecuting a crime like that rather than the DOJ, which we know during the Hunter Biden investigation obstructed and pulled their punches and slow walked it to ensure that he really didn't get into as much trouble as he should have.
Yeah, absolutely. And Miranda Devine, you just gave me the perfect segue. You got a new book coming out, by the way, called The Big Guy, appropriately. And also, I can't wait, by the way, to read it. I'm so excited because you always get such great stuff. But it also talks about essentially Blinken being the cover-up and chief expert.
Yes, that's right. Anthony Blinken and Joe Biden go way back from when Blinken was a young staffer in Biden's Senate days. And, of course, he was an aspiring Secretary of State during the 2020 campaign. And so when our story about the laptop from hell first broke 3 weeks before that election, Anthony Blinken was put in charge of damage control. And, of course, he made the phone call to the former acting director of the CIA, a man by the name of Morell, who then put in train that dishonest letter signed by 51 of his intelligence colleagues, former intelligence officials, mostly from the CIA, who lied and said that the laptop, and therefore our story, was Russian disinformation, although they used weasel words. They said had all the earmarks of a Russian information operation. And they're actually using those words to try and pretend that they didn't do anything dishonest. But, obviously it was printed immediately in all the media as a Russian disinformation operation. The general public did not make any distinction, neither did they. And in fact, they didn't push back at all at what they're pretending now was a media misrepresentation of their words. They, in fact, fanned out James Clapper, John Brennan. They were on MSNBC, they were on CNN, promoting the story and doubling down and saying that Donald Trump and the Republicans and the New York Post were complicit in this Russian disinformation operation.
Yeah, amazing. Judge Weinberg.
And Miranda, also part of your article in the Post and in the book, you're talking about Blinken's relationship to his fellow Malley, who really is an Iranian plant working at the closest levels of secrecy in the Iranian issues facing our country, and putting together the deal for the Iran nuclear deal, which is a sellout of this country.
And also still continuing to be on security calls. I mean, you can't make it up.
It's unbelievable. It's Robert Malley, who was the Obama-era U.S. envoy to Iran, and then after Trump disbanded Iran nuclear deal. Then Biden comes in and reanimates it and brings back Robert Malley again as the Iran envoy. Robert Malley is a childhood friend from Paris of Anthony Blinken, who went to school and grew up in Paris. Blinken brought him into the State Department as the envoy. And then last year, Malley was suspended and had his security clearance taken away without pay because there was an FBI investigation into alleged mishandling of classified information. And, of course, he was suspected of giving his Iranian friends classified material. Now, that investigation is still going on, but of course, Robert Malley, while on suspension, has been given a plum gig at Yale, of course.
Of course, Miranda. And Cox has a quick question.
Just briefly, one of the most shocking things was that kind of a letter has to be cleared internally at the CIA, and they cleared it.
Yes, and not only did they clear it, it was the letter, because it was so political, was sent upstairs, and Gina Haspel, the then CIA director under Donald Trump, gave it the green light.
Wow, that's interesting. That is interesting.
And, of course, the CIA knew that the laptop was not Russian disinformation because the FBI had it for almost a year. They'd had it for 10 months, and they had already looked into it, investigated, and cleared it as being perfectly sound to use in a court of law as evidence. They knew
Miranda,
it was Russian disinformation.
Thank you. You know what this means? The deep state is getting deeper.
Yes, and this is what concerns me, is that they pulled out all stops to make sure that Donald Trump did not win the 2020 election. And they know that now he is, if he does win this in November, that he will be dismantling the deep state apparatus that tried to destroy him. And they are going to make sure that doesn't happen. So I'm extremely concerned about what lengths they will go to ensure that
the lengths they're going to go to is close to murder.
Yep.
Well, we've just seen two attempted assassinations of Donald Trump, and I hope that there aren't any more, but, that can't be guaranteed. And the fact that Donald Trump has had such inadequate Secret Service protection, even after the first assassination attempt, it tells you a lot.
Thank you, Miranda.
It sure does.
And what do we all stand for?
Truth, justice, and the American way.
God bless America, because we need his blessing.
At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.